Hey everybody, I'm back and we are going to talk about why self-love is annoying. I'm laughing just because it's a little bit of a weird thing to say. But the reason I wanted to make a self-love episode is because, you hear this tossed around all the time. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm kind of sick of it. You just have to love yourself first. If you just love yourself, everything will be okay. Or, then you can find love with someone else. Or, I actually really love RuPaul. But RuPaul says, if you don't love yourself, how are you going to love anyone else? I somewhat agree, but I also somewhat disagree. So we're going to get into some of the nuances with self-love and, what does it mean? And what do you need to do or not do? And do you even need to do anything or not do anything? So what I don't want though, and why I wanted to do this episode is because I don't want this idea of I have to love myself perfectly or on a certain level, or I have to sort of achieve a certain type of self-love or a manifestation of self-love. And then I can have a healthy relationship. Then, I can be a happy person, whatever it is. And because I almost think it becomes this mythical thing, what is self-love? How do you know if you love yourself enough? I think I love myself, but I don't know, you can't measure it. There's, it's a concept. It's a construct. I don't want us to get lost in the weeds on this construct, I think there's some benefits of it, right? Maybe it encourages this idea of self-care or healing. 100% on board with these things, right? And I also think it can just be a mental obstacle. So let's not do that part, okay? I want to also point out, I might have mentioned this in a different episode, but I was Buddhist for a solid 13 years until both places wound up having sex scandals, interestingly enough. But yeah, so there was a lot I learned from Buddhism, and now I probably follow Eckhart Tolle more so than anything else in terms of spirituality. And both Buddhism and Eckhart Tolle talked about, this idea of no self or non-duality. So I'm going to break that down a little bit. We are so focused as a culture on self, right? And also just our little egos, right? Which are cute. We're not trying to get rid of them, but we're so focused on self, our self-esteem, our body image, our relationships, our identity, our status, our income, our sexual orientation, our relationship status, our gender identity. So there's all these things that we kind of grasp onto. Our roles, such as, this is my job, or I am a daughter, or I am a mother, or I'm a child, or I am a, whatever, that's Eckhart Tolle would say that's not who we are, right? Who we are is really the self energy, which I talked about, I think in the Emotions of Sex episode, which was one of the early ones. Who we are matters on some level, right? We all are a little bit unique. We're all going to express in a different way. But the idea is, instead of loving ourselves, what if we just are? So it's almost more of this neutral concept. So instead of I have to have an opinion about myself, or I have to have certain positive thoughts toward myself, there's kind of this concept of no self, right? What if we're not grasping on to all these different identities, all these different concepts that are really coming from the ego? Because then if there's no self, there's kind of no other either, right? And just with everything that's been going on the last few years, I think it's an important concept. What if we stop othering? What if we stop gripping onto our identities, even to the idea of being right? That goes along with this as well. And then you get to this concept of non-duality where we're all one, right? And it sounds very like flower child, like hippy dippy, whatever. And like it kind of is, right? That was an important revolution, the whole hippie era for our country. And I've always said I'm like half entrepreneur, half hippie. So you're getting a little bit of my hippie side today. But this idea really fits with internal family systems too, right? And I always think it's so fascinating when we have, smart spiritual guy Eckhart Tolle, smart spiritual guy, the Buddha, and then also internal family systems. They're all pointing to the same thing, right? Because our self energy is our higher consciousness. And it's this spacious, I think of it as spacious energy, and it's infinite. And it's this idea that we're all an expression of source energy. And I'm going to do a shout out to one of my best friends, Melissa De Silva, who's an artist. She just posted on Instagram today about her art and like that her art is an extension of her, but also that she is her art. And I kind of think of it like whatever you believe religiously or spiritually, like there's some sort of creative life force energy or we wouldn't exist, right? And so whatever that is, however you want to conceptualize that, we are an expression of that. And so it's kind of like we are the art of the artist, and the artist is the art. Right? So that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. So like we're all gonna be different types of expressions. Awesome. But really like the essence is like we're all one. This separateness is more of an illusion. So I bring that up because self-love is kind of, it's still referencing the self. And so I think it's falling slightly short for me spiritually. It's still kind of attaching to all these identities and all that stuff. Now I'm going to flip to the other side and talk about how self-love can be important. So self-love is important on kind of a day-to-day basis, right? I just talked about the very, very deep level, like our essence, who we are. Now I'm going to talk more about the relative level. Like, okay, Heather, we still live in this world. We still need to function. We still need to pay our bills, right? We still need to have a job, regardless of how much we identify with it. So some of the ways I do think self-love can be important, or the concept of self-love can be helpful to us, is body appreciation. Sometimes people say they have body image problems or body dysmorphia or eating disorders. And I think body appreciation can be such an amazing tool. It's something that like I really focus on quite a bit. And the mantra sort of that I have that you're welcome to borrow is that like our bodies are doing like 99.9% of the things amazingly at any given moment that we're alive. Like just to keep us alive, they're doing so many complex things at the same time. And just like, we're like walking miracles, right? So I think when we look at it on that level, to then be like, oh my God, I look kind of chubby today, or like, I don't feel sexy or whatever. Not to dismiss that. That's still your experience. It's still something to work through. But I think really focusing on body appreciation can help put that in perspective for us, where it's like, maybe it's okay if I don't have my eyelash extensions on today. I'm not talking about me because I don't wear them, but or maybe it's okay if I'm not wearing the most flattering outfit to the gym, or maybe it's okay if I'm not having like my best hair day, in my opinion, right? Because my body is still a miracle. So I think it's just about perspective. And so often like working with clients on, negative thoughts about their bodies, not feeling sexy, not feeling like anyone's ever going to love them. It's like we're losing sight of the miracle of existence, which we are a part of. So getting like extra spiritual today. I didn't know I was going to get into all this. I also think this comes into play for me as a sex therapist with genital self-love, because I definitely grew up being like, oh, like vaginas are weird, or like vulvas. I didn't even know the word vulva. I didn't think I knew the word vagina until I was like 9. But, I was like, oh, that's weird or whatever. And there was something about like penises are just out there and they're just like just a phallic thing, and it's just there. Where I think, vaginas and vulvas it seemed a little more mysterious. And you're like, what's going on there? And then you kind of like hear things about like smell and then like periods being like whatever and not fun and no one likes them and cramps and, and then people making jokes about women being hormonal and how that's like, oh, they get crazy around their period or I can tell, blah, blah, blah. So just all these little comments that we make in society, I see a lot of women that have not a great relationship with their genitals, don't want to touch their genitals, kind of uncomfortable with masturbation maybe, and it does get in the way of their sex life. And I think the more we can realize that our genitals, regardless of, what genitals you have, are still part of your miraculous human body. And our sexuality is also part of our miraculous human body. So I just kind of want everyone to listen to this and kind of be like, wow, I'm a goddamn miracle. Like if everyone could feel that way, I'd feel so happy. So let me know if this is doing anything for you. But also masturbation, right? I think so many people are brought up thinking, oh, masturbation's bad. And, all these messages are kind of implanted in us from society, from religion, school, family, church, whatever. What if, masturbation and orgasm are just great and healthy and like part of how the body works and maybe a different aspect, and I look at it in terms of the internal family systems parts work. We have some parts that are running our daily lives. We have lots of parts that are like trying to be responsible, trying to be productive, trying to be good enough, feeling pressure, feeling anxiety and managing all of that. And then the sexual parts can feel so different, I think, but it's so interesting to explore those and sometimes does involve some shadow work for people, which is this idea that not everything's rainbows and sunshines, nor does it have to be. And we can be kind of these complex beings that maybe we've got some parts that feel like rainbows and sunshine, and we've got other parts that are dark, even dark humor, right? Dark aspects of our sexuality. And that doesn't always have to be bad, right? We want to make sure that we're being consensual with other people. Consenting adults is kind of the only requirement. I think educated, risk aware. We talked about that in a different episode too, right? Risk aware consenting adults is what I would say. But then beyond that, it's like, okay, cool. Like enjoy yourselves, explore these other parts of you, explore these other aspects of who you are. All right. One other thing I want to say is that our relationships are going to mirror whatever psychodramas we have going on. So whatever beliefs we have about ourselves, whatever beliefs we have about relationships, we act those out in our relationships, which is just so fascinating. And I will say it's much easier to see it with other people. So if you're kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about, Heather, like I am drama free and so perfect. Look at your friends, look at your family members, because you're going to see it. Right? You're going to see somebody who's using sex for validation. You're going to see somebody who maybe doesn't even like the person they're with that much, but just really likes the attention. You're going to see people who are, sticking in relationships that like really aren't working for them on some levels. You're going to see people avoiding relationships who, want to be in them in some way, maybe don't want to be vulnerable or don't want to be so invested and, it doesn't feel safe for them. So if you don't see it with yourself yet, see what you notice with other people, right? And when you can kind of observe relationships, and, I get to do this for a living too, which is cool. You can also see that you attract people who are at a similar level of functioning, who are at a similar level of consciousness to you. And this is not to say that like, oh, some people are like so advanced, but the idea is actually that you're 100% lovable regardless of like where you're at with healing things or still enacting psychodramas and stories you have about yourself and relationships. And this is where I also want to share that a big point I wanted to make with this episode is that you don't have to love yourself first, right? Sometimes you see other people who are struggling with issues and you're able to love them and you're able to see like, wow, like they're in it and they're like trying and they're working through things and they're kind of a hot mess, but it's like this beautiful mess and they have so much to offer and give, even though they are a little messy right now. And then sometimes it's like, oh, that applies to me too. What? I get it now. And so I had that experience, I was in a 12-step program for, 7 years or something like that. I thought I'd be in it forever. And then I just kind of moved in a different direction. But it was through that program where I was able to see other people, and it was the food program. I was able to see other people struggling with food and overeating and how hard they would be on themselves sometimes. And it was actually through that I was like, stop being so hard on yourself. Like, it's okay. Like, how you eat does not define your worth, right? Like, whether or not you're struggling with alcohol does not define your worth. You know, maybe you have a porn addiction. That does not define your worth. I want to say that again. Like, whatever vice you have going on, whatever addiction you have going on, it does not define your worth. Your bank account does not define your worth. Your weight does not define your worth. Your relationship status does not define your worth. Okay. But for me, I was able to kind of learn that from the outside in. And so that's where I kind of feel like when we focus too much on self-love, we're kind of making it seem like it's this one directional thing where first you have to be in this place of self-love, then you can experience all these things from the outside in. But it could be first you love someone else and you learn from that, kind of like I did in my 12-step experience, or first somebody loves you and it's like, oh, maybe I am lovable. Maybe I can be as kind to myself about my body, for example, this was a common one, as my partner is. I think our partners usually like our bodies, and I think we're usually kind of jerks to ourselves on average in general. And then I've mentioned this, but I want to reiterate, I do encourage self-energy, that higher consciousness, that inner security, that kind of not abandoning ourselves. But I also believe other people can help. And I also believe we can do this from the outside in. So I'm actually going to have a guest in the semi-near future who will talk more about this concept of feeling good from the outside in. So it could be the clothes we wear. It could be, getting a haircut, some kind of little makeover thing. It could be dressing just more in alignment with your personality, kind of expressing the real you more on a day-to-day basis. And that kind of alignment, I think, actually taps into our self-energy. So basically the great news is everything leads you in the right direction. So whether you're kind of building security from the inside out, from the outside in your love for other people and receiving love from other people, it's all good. And it all works. So I am going to link in the show notes to Eckhart Tolle video on direct experiencing. And the idea here is that, when we're directly experiencing, we're not turning everything into a concept. We're not grasping onto these labels and these identities. And I'm actually going to do a whole episode on that concept too, labels and identities, but we're just being. We're kind of like using our senses. We're taking it in without having to label. So even if you see a tree, it's not just like, oh, there's a green tree and the leaf looks like this. And if I drew it, I would do it like this. Or, we're not analyzing. It's not like studying. It just could be, wow. And that's it. There's like a sense of awe, right? Even labeling it a tree is a concept. So anyways, Eckhart says it much better than me. So check it out. But yeah, realize that self is kind of a concept. It's a little bit of an illusion. And if you're struggling with self-concept, that could be good news for you too. Where like, maybe you just kind of let go a little bit of the concept of self and see if that works for you. Thank you all for listening so much. And I will catch you next week.